The dragon Empress sat on her high throne, her golden scales glinting under the soft glow of the crystal chandeliers. Her eyes, sharp and fierce, scanned the crowded hall of tutors and advisors. Each one shifted nervously under her gaze. In the center of the room, a small, restless dragon hatchling thrashed and squealed, flames flickering at the corners of its mouth. The Empress's patience had already been tested beyond measure. 20 tutors had tried and failed to calm her child in just 1 month. None had lasted more than a few days. The room smelled of burnt incense and fear. Every tutor knew the punishment for failure could be severe. Some would be sent away in disgrace, while others might vanish entirely. The Empress did not tolerate weakness. She had ruled for centuries, guiding her kingdom with wisdom and iron will. Her child, though young, was a dragon of great power, and she demanded nothing less than excellence. "Another day, another failure," the Empress muttered, her voice like rolling thunder. "I cannot understand why my own spawn cannot be taught." She glared at the latest tutor, a tall dragon scholar with silvery scales and trembling claws. "And you? What excuse do you bring for today's disaster?" The scholar stammered, unable to find the words. "And mistress, he would not listen. No magic, no fire control, nothing seems to work." The Empress's eyes narrowed. "Nothing seems to work? Do you know how many have tried before you?" 20 tutors. All failed because they thought force and knowledge could shape him. I demand results. You are dismissed." The scholar bowed deeply, hiding his relief behind a mask of shame, and left the hall with his tail between his legs. Murmurs spread among the remaining tutors. Each one wondered if they were next. The Empress's child, a small dragon with bright emerald eyes, twitched impatiently on the floor, his claws scraping the polished marble. His squeals echoed through the hall like small explosions. Meanwhile, in the far corner, unnoticed by most, a human janitor swept quietly, moving between the tables and rugs with his mop and broom. His uniform was plain and his hands were rough from years of work. Humans were rare in the Dragon Palace, often treated as servants and cleaning staff. They were expected to do simple tasks and stay invisible. Yet this one watched carefully, observing the frustrated tutors and the restless child with quiet interest. He had seen them all, the grand scholars, the fire mages, the teachers who boasted of their knowledge. Each had tried spells, lectures, and training methods, and each had failed. The child's eyes never held fear or respect. They held something else entirely, wild energy and curiosity. The human did not understand magic, but he could see the child's emotions clearly. A loud crash interrupted his thoughts as another tutor dropped a stack of books in frustration. "He won't listen. He won't," the tutor yelled, throwing up his claws in defeat. The Empress slammed her clawed hand on the armrest of her throne, the sound echoing like a drum. "Enough," she roared. "I have had enough of your incompetence. If you cannot teach him, you will leave. I will find someone who can." The janitor paused in his work. Something in him stirred, a quiet, strange feeling he had never felt before. The Empress's child turned his head slightly, noticing the human for the first time. The child's ears twitched and he let out a small, curious squeak. The hall seemed to freeze for a moment as the tiny dragon's eyes followed the human. No tutor had ever captured his attention, no matter what spell or trick they tried. The janitor smiled faintly to himself. He did not understand dragons fully. He did not know how to control fire or teach ancient knowledge. But he could see that the child was not evil or stubborn. He was frightened, overwhelmed, and lonely. The human knelt down quietly, setting his broom aside, and simply looked at the dragon hatchling. For a moment, the Empress herself leaned forward, intrigued. No one had dared approach the child so calmly without trying to force obedience or display skill. The child made a small chirping noise and shuffled closer to the human, his tiny claws tapping the marble. Something about the human seemed safe, different, and interesting. The tutors whispered among themselves, uneasy at the human's boldness. Some scoffed. "A janitor? What can he possibly do that we could not?" But the child made a small happy sound, a high-pitched trill, and in that sound was a spark of hope. The Empress watched silently, her sharp mind noting every movement. Perhaps this human was foolish. Perhaps he would fail like the others. Yet, something told her to wait to see what would happen. In the quiet corners of the palace, a strange and tiny connection began to form, a bond that no magic or knowledge could create. And in that moment, as the tutors retreated to whisper among themselves and the Empress considered her next move, the janitor simply sat down, crossed his legs, and began humming softly, a tune so simple that it carried no magic, only human warmth. The child's eyes widened. He paused, tilted his head and listened. For the first time in a month, the restless hatchling was still. The janitor's soft humming filled the quiet hall, barely louder than a whisper. The sound was gentle and warm, like a small fire on a cold night. The dragon hatchling stopped thrashing and squealing. Its tiny claws dug lightly into the marble floor, but its eyes, wide and bright, fixed on the human. No tutor had ever made him pause like this. The Empress leaned forward on her throne, her eyes narrowing with interest. She did not understand why this lowly human could do what 20 of her finest tutors could not. The hatchling, usually wild and untamed, tilted its head and let out a small chirp, almost like a question. The janitor smiled softly and kept humming. "Stay still, little one," he said quietly, though not commanding, only suggesting. His voice had no magic, no force, just calm. He inched closer, moving slowly so he would not scare the hatchling. The child blinked, then took a tiny step forward, sniffing the air between them. The tutors watched nervously from the edges of the room. Some whispered, "Why is he doing this? He's only a janitor. He doesn't know anything about dragons." Others frowned, worried that the Empress might favor this human over them. They could not understand it. Magic and skill had always been the answer in the Dragon Palace. Knowledge was power. But here was a human, doing nothing but singing softly, and the child listened. The Empress's golden eyes narrowed as she studied the scene. The child's ears twitched with each note, his small tail flicking lightly. The janitor hummed a familiar tune he had learned as a boy on Earth, a song his mother had sung to him when he was scared or sad. It was a simple melody, but it carried warmth and safety. The child's body relaxed. The muscles that had been tense for weeks loosened. His fiery breath, which had flickered uncontrollably, slowed. The janitor crouched lower, careful not to appear threatening. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe. Nothing bad will happen." He moved one hand slowly, letting the child see him, not touch him yet, only offering presence. The hatchling took another step forward, this time closer to the janitor. He let out a small hiss of curiosity, and then, almost shyly, pressed a tiny claw against the human's hand. The janitor smiled softly and stroked the child's scaled head gently, careful not to hurt him. A murmur ran through the room. The tutors exchanged worried glances. "This is impossible," one whispered. "He's only a human. How can he calm the Empress's child without magic?" But the Empress stayed silent, watching every movement. She had seen tutors use fire magic, teaching spells, shouting commands and threatening punishment, but none of it had worked. And now, a human was doing something different. Something natural. Something she could not control or understand. The child's emerald eyes softened. His small wings twitched, but not with anger, only excitement. He made a tiny puff of smoke from his nostrils, a playful gesture, and the janitor laughed softly. "There, see? Nothing to be afraid of." He continued humming, slower now, letting the rhythm match the child's breathing. The tutors backed away, unsure what to do. Some feared the Empress's reaction. Others feared that if the human succeeded, their status in the palace could be in danger. The janitor, however, paid no attention. He only focused on the child. Minutes passed. The child's movements slowed. His tail stopped flicking, his claws relaxed, and he leaned slightly against the janitor's hand. For the first time in a month, the small dragon was calm. He blinked slowly, listening to the gentle human voice, and then, as if trusting instinctively, laid down on the marble floor, curling his small body in a safe, relaxed position. The Empress's eyes widened slightly. She had expected failure, but what she saw surprised her. The human did not use force, magic, or intimidation. He simply used patience and care, something that dragons with all their power often overlooked. The janitor's voice continued softly. "Sleep now, little one. Everything is okay." The child's breathing became steady. His small chest rose and fell rhythmically, and his eyes finally closed. A soft purr, like the crackle of fire, escaped him. The tutors whispered in disbelief. He did it," one said, barely daring to speak. "The child, he's asleep." The Empress leaned back on her throne, silent for a moment. Then quietly she spoke. "A human has done what 20 of my tutors could not. He has calmed my child." Her voice carried both awe and curiosity. "How?" The janitor, unaware of the Empress's words, stood slowly and bowed his head respectfully. "I don't know, Your Majesty. I just sang to him and he listened." The Empress's eyes glimmered, sharp and calculating. She had always believed in strength, skill, and knowledge. But perhaps there was something else, something she had never considered, that could reach even a dragon's heart. The child shifted slightly in his sleep, pressing one tiny claw against the janitor's hand, a silent promise of trust. The janitor smiled, unsure of the importance of the moment, but feeling something warm and powerful nonetheless. The Empress stayed silent, watching the human and her child. In her long life she had never seen anything like this. A simple human, with no magic and no formal training, had succeeded where the greatest minds of the Dragon Kingdom had failed. And for the first time in weeks, the Dragon Empress allowed herself a small, thoughtful smile. The human janitor had no idea that this moment would change the palace forever. He only knew that a child, scared and restless, had finally found peace. And that was enough. The next morning, the Dragon Palace was quiet, except for the soft crackle of fire in the halls and the distant hum of servants moving about. The human janitor arrived at his usual cleaning duties, sweeping the floors and arranging the long tapestries, but his mind was not on the chores. He kept thinking about the small dragon hatchling, curled safely in the nursery. He had never felt such a connection with any creature before. The Empress, meanwhile, had summoned a meeting with her advisors and tutors. They whispered nervously among themselves. "Did you see what he did?" one tutor asked. "A human, a janitor, calmed the hatchling. How is that even possible?" "Impossible," another hissed. "We are dragons. We know fire, magic, and teaching." And yet, the child obeyed him. The Empress listened silently, her golden eyes sharp and thoughtful. She had always valued power and skill above all else, but this human had something that no dragon had ever shown her: patience, understanding, and a strange kind of courage. She decided to watch the janitor herself. Later that day, the janitor returned to the nursery, carrying nothing but his humble mop. The small dragon hatchling was awake now, pacing nervously on the floor, flames flickering from his tiny nostrils. The child's emerald eyes darted around the room, restless as ever. The janitor smiled softly. "Hello there," he said gently. "Don't worry. I'm here now. Everything is okay." The hatchling paused and stared. No one had spoken to him so kindly before. All the tutors had shouted, scolded, or tried to control him with spells and magic. This human spoke quietly, without power, without force. The child tilted his head, unsure what to make of this strange creature. The janitor began humming again, softly and slowly. The melody was simple, calm, and full of warmth. It was not magic, but it carried something even stronger: care and understanding. The hatchling's body relaxed slightly. His claws stopped scraping the floor. The flickers of fire in his nostrils dimmed. Minutes passed. The janitor crouched down so he was closer to the child. He spoke softly, describing the world outside the nursery, telling small stories about the palace, and even the humans he had known long ago. The dragon listened, tilting his head, his small eyes wide with curiosity. The Empress had hidden behind a screen, watching silently. She had never seen her child calm down like this, not even for a moment. Tutors had tried spells, magic, and lessons, and all had failed. Yet this human, using nothing but his voice and kindness, had gained the child's trust. The janitor continued humming, and slowly the child took a small step forward. He sniffed the janitor's hand, then, as if deciding it was safe, pressed his tiny claw gently against it. The janitor smiled. "That's right," he said quietly. "You're safe. Nothing will hurt you." The hatchling blinked and let out a soft chirp, a sound of surprise and curiosity. The janitor laughed softly. "See? You can calm down. You can be safe. You just needed someone who understood you." The tutors outside whispered again, their voices full of fear and envy. "How can this be?" one asked. "He is not a teacher. He cannot use magic. And yet, the child obeys him. What does this mean for us?" The Empress did not answer. She only continued watching, her golden eyes narrow and thoughtful. Something had shifted. She had always believed that power and skill were the most important things in life. But here was a human, powerless and humble, showing a strength that she had never considered: the strength of patience, empathy, and heart. Hours passed. The janitor stayed with the hatchling, humming and talking quietly, never rushing, never forcing, never scolding. Slowly, the child's small wings folded against his back, and his restless movements slowed. He lay down on the soft floor of the nursery, his head resting against the janitor's hand. His emerald eyes closed, and a soft, steady breath escaped him. The janitor smiled, watching the small chest rise and fall. "Sleep well," he whispered. "You're safe now." In the hall outside, the tutors were silent. They had never seen anything like this. Magic, knowledge, and skill had failed again and again, but a simple human had succeeded. Some of them were angry. Some of them were afraid. And some, quietly, began to wonder if perhaps they had been missing something all along. The Empress finally spoke, her voice calm but full of authority. "Bring him to me." She did not shout or scold. She simply spoke, commanding attention. The tutors hurried to obey, though carefully, for they feared her judgment. The janitor, unsure of what was happening, stood and bowed respectfully. He did not understand why the Empress wanted to see him. He only knew that he had helped the child feel safe, and that had been enough. The Empress stepped from the shadows, her golden scales shining, her eyes fixed on the human. She studied him carefully, noting his humility, his quiet confidence, and the bond he had formed with her child. "You," she said finally, her voice strong, "have done what 20 of my finest tutors could not. You have calmed my hatchling. Tell me, how?" The janitor hesitated, unsure what to say. I don't know, Your Majesty. I just sang to him and he listened. He trusted me." The Empress's eyes glimmered. She had expected failure, yet here was success, simple, quiet, and unexpected. In her long life she had never seen anything like it. Perhaps there was something in humans, something she had overlooked, that could teach even dragons a new kind of strength. The small dragon hatchling shifted slightly in his sleep, pressing a tiny claw against the janitor's hand. The janitor smiled softly. He did not know the importance of this moment, but he felt it in his heart. And for the first time in many months, the Dragon Empress allowed herself to feel a quiet hope. The days passed quietly in the palace, but word of the janitor's success had begun to spread. Whispers floated through the halls like restless shadows. "Have you seen the human in the nursery?" one tutor whispered to another. "He calmed the hatchling. No one else could. Not with magic, not with spells." Many of the tutors were angry. Their pride had been wounded. They had spent years mastering fire, flight, and ancient dragon knowledge. They had learned spells and incantations that humans could never understand. Yet here was a simple janitor, without any magic, without formal teaching, who had earned the trust of the Dragon Empress's child. Even some of the palace servants watched with curiosity. Humans had always been expected to clean, serve meals, and remain invisible. But now, one human had done something extraordinary. He had done what no one else could. The janitor continued his work as always, sweeping floors, dusting tables, and quietly moving through the halls. But every day he returned to the nursery. The hatchling had begun to recognize him, waiting for his voice, listening for his soft humming. The child's emerald eyes shone with curiosity and trust, a bond growing stronger each day. The tutors, unable to ignore it any longer, came to observe. They hid behind pillars and tapestries, watching the human move gently and speak softly to the hatchling. None of them could believe what they were seeing. The child responded not to commands, not to magic, but to the janitor's calm voice and steady presence. The Empress, ever watchful, observed from her throne. Her golden eyes followed every movement. She had always valued strength, intelligence, and skill, but the janitor had shown her a new kind of power, one that came from patience, understanding, and heart. "Perhaps," the Empress said quietly to herself, "there is more to strength than I have ever known." One afternoon, as the janitor hummed a soft tune and the hatchling rested against his hand, a senior tutor, a dragon with silver scales and a long, elegant neck, stepped forward. His eyes narrowed, a mixture of jealousy and curiosity in them. "Human," he said, his voice low and cautious, "tell me, what is it you are doing that we cannot?" The janitor looked up, surprised. I just sing to him," he said simply. "I talk to him, I stay calm, and I make sure he knows he is safe. That's all." The tutor snorted. "All? That is all? You have no magic, no spells, no knowledge of dragon behavior, and yet you calm him? How?" The janitor shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe he just needed someone who cared. Someone who listened, not someone who shouted or forced him to behave." The tutor looked at the child, who blinked slowly, eyes trusting and calm. For the first time, the tutor felt a flicker of understanding. The child did not respond to fear or magic. He responded to care. To someone who treated him as more than a student or a weapon. The Empress called the tutor aside. "You see what I see," she said quietly. "Power is not always in fire or magic or knowledge. Sometimes power is in the heart. Remember this always." Meanwhile, the janitor continued his quiet work, unaware of the growing respect and attention he was receiving. He simply wanted the child to be happy and safe. But slowly, even the most skeptical tutors began to learn from him. Not lessons of fire or magic, but lessons of patience, calm, and empathy. One evening, as the sun set over the golden palace, casting long shadows across the halls, the janitor sat beside the hatchling. He hummed softly, and the child's small wings rested quietly against his back. The Empress appeared silently at the doorway. She watched the scene for several long moments, her expression unreadable. Finally she spoke. "Human," she said, her voice steady but filled with something rare, approval. "You have done what none could. You have calmed my child, and in doing so you have taught me something as well. I wish to honor your gift." The janitor blinked, unsure what to say. I'm just a janitor, Your Majesty. I don't deserve honor. He paused, looking at the hatchling who let out a tiny, contented trill, pressing closer to him. "I just wanted him to feel safe." The Empress's golden eyes softened. "Exactly. That is why you succeeded. Strength, magic, and knowledge are important, yes. But sometimes the simplest act of kindness is stronger than any spell. You have shown that to me and to this child." From that day the janitor's role in the palace changed. He was no longer just a cleaner or servant. He became a guide to the hatchling, a caretaker who taught the tutors and even the Empress something they had long forgotten: the value of patience, understanding, and human empathy. The tutors continued their lessons in fire, magic, and flight, but they also began to watch the janitor carefully. They learned that sometimes, the smallest, simplest acts could bring the greatest change. The palace slowly began to shift, as dragons of every rank started to respect the human who had touched their most precious hatchling's heart. And the hatchling? He thrived. His emerald eyes shone bright, his tiny wings stretched proudly, and his small body was calm and joyful. He had found a friend in the human janitor, someone who understood him in ways no dragon ever had. The Empress watched them together from her throne, her golden eyes thoughtful. For the first time in centuries she smiled, not because of power or magic, but because she had witnessed something far rarer: the quiet, gentle strength of a human heart. Days turned into weeks, and the human janitor continued his quiet work in the palace. But he was no longer invisible. Every tutor, guard, and servant had begun to notice him, not for his cleaning, but for the bond he had formed with the Dragon Empress's hatchling. Whispers filled the corridors. "The human, he tames the hatchling," some said. "No one else can," others muttered. The hatchling had grown calmer, more confident, and even playful. His tiny wings stretched, claws sharpened, and emerald eyes sparkled with curiosity. The tutors, who once feared the child's wild nature, began to study the human's actions. They observed how he moved slowly, spoke softly, and never forced the hatchling to do anything. Slowly they began to understand that this was why he had succeeded where they had failed. The Empress watched carefully from her throne. She had seen her hatchling respond to countless spells, commands, and magical lessons, and yet none of them had worked. Only the human had earned the child's trust. Her mind, sharp and commanding, considered all possibilities. Could it be that humans, so small and fragile, had a power dragons could not see? She was curious, and more than curious, she was impressed. One morning she called the janitor to her throne room. He entered humbly, carrying nothing but his mop and a small cloth for dusting. The room was grand, gold and crystal shining in the light, yet the human did not look afraid. He bowed deeply, eyes lowered, hands folded in front of him. "You have done what no one else could," the Empress said, her golden eyes fixed on him. 20 tutors have failed. You have succeeded. Tell me, what is your secret?" The janitor hesitated. He did not understand why he was being honored. I don't know, Your Majesty. I just cared. I sang to him. I spoke softly. I wanted him to feel safe. That's all." The Empress considered his words. Care? Safety? These are things dragons do not often consider. We rely on strength, knowledge, and magic. And yet, your simple kindness has done more than all of that combined. She paused. "You have a gift, human. One I wish to honor." The janitor blinked in surprise. "Honor? I don't need honor, Your Majesty. I just want the hatchling to be happy." The Empress smiled faintly, a rare and small expression that revealed her respect. "Your humility is part of your strength. From this day forward you will be more than a janitor. You will be the hatchling's caretaker, the one who teaches him not with magic but with heart. Your place is in this palace by his side." The janitor's eyes widened. He could not believe what he was hearing. He had only ever wanted to do his job well, to help a frightened child. Now, the most powerful dragon in the kingdom was giving him a position of honor. From that day forward, the human's life changed. He spent his days in the nursery teaching the hatchling with patience, kindness, and love. Tutors and magicians observed and learned from him, realizing that dragons, with all their power, had much to learn about care and empathy. Even the Empress occasionally joined them, watching quietly as her child responded to the human's calm voice. The hatchling thrived. He learned to control his fire, to spread his wings, and to explore the palace with curiosity and joy. But above all, he learned trust. He trusted the human, and through that, he learned to trust the world around him. Other dragons in the palace, who had once doubted humans, began to change their views. They saw that even a small human could make a difference, could teach lessons that no amount of magic or fire could. Slowly, respect for humans grew in the Dragon Kingdom. The human janitor became a symbol, a living example that strength was not only in fire and magic, but also in patience, understanding, and courage of heart. The Empress called the palace council together. "Let this be known," she said, her voice strong and commanding. "A human has shown us a power we have overlooked. Let all tutors, magicians, and dragons remember, true strength lies not only in magic but in heart. Respect this human, for he has earned it." The janitor stood quietly, listening, feeling more proud than he had ever felt in his life. He had never sought recognition, yet here it was. And more importantly, the hatchling was safe, happy, and learning. That was the reward he had always wanted. The Empress smiled again, watching her child playfully flap his wings beside the human. "Perhaps," she thought, "humans are small but their hearts are mighty. Perhaps they are stronger than we ever imagined." The hatchling curled up against the janitor's side, purring softly. The janitor stroked his scaled head, humming the gentle tune that had started it all. For the first time in many years, the Dragon Empress felt a sense of peace in her palace. Not because of power or magic, but because a human had shown them the true meaning of care. And so, the janitor, once unseen and simple, became a hero in the Dragon Kingdom, not for fire, strength, or magic, but for a human heart that refused to give up. The palace had changed, the hatchling had grown, and the Empress had learned a lesson she would never forget. Sometimes, the smallest and simplest beings can achieve the greatest things. The dragons of the kingdom would speak of this for centuries. And the janitor? He simply continued his work, humming softly, watching over the hatchling, and knowing that his care had changed the fate of the dragon lineage forever.